great guest. We've got a screenwriter and indie comic creator, Danny Baram, who is the writer behind Halloween Town, and he is gonna just tell us anything that we would like to know about the comic, where we can read about it, why we want to read it. It's I have to say I read the first couple of issues. I don't want to give too much away because I can tell that you really did a great job of. A lot of times people kind of give away too much in the beginning. They feel like they have to do all this world building, and you really are very slow in the reveals. But before we get into all that, I'd love it if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm originally from a small town on the East Coast, Bloomfield, Connecticut, near Hartford. And I've been in the LA area for, hard to believe, but about 20 years now. I moved out here after I graduated college, kind of looking to pursue a career in the entertainment industry like many do. And, I was really into writing. I've always loved writing. I kind of came out here trying to make it as a screenwriter. And, that's been a very long journey, with a lot of fits and starts and ups and downs, as you can imagine. But, one of my first loves has always been comic books. And, I read comic books every week. I get my regular, Wednesday haul. And for a long time, I thought about writing comics and, how do I even go about and make that happen? And it was challenging. I'm sure you've spoken to others who have that sort of, they hit the brick wall when you're trying to, especially as a writer, because you're very reliant on an artist, right? There's some people that I've met who I'm jealous of who are both a writer and artist. And, I have some like rudimentary art skill. I really like, drawing and doodling my characters and stuff. But, I'm primarily a writer. And so I could never quite get over the hump for a while of like, how do I find a good artist? How do I pay them? How do I make it all work and come together? And finally, I got to a point where I was just really intent on making it happen. And I had this idea of Halloween Team that I thought would work really well as a comic. I think originally I had actually, sort of developed it as a TV idea. But the serialized nature of that, translated, I think, really well into comics. And it was like a pretty comic booky story. I thought it would really work visually as a comic. And so I really tried to spend a lot of time like readapting the script into comic book form and making it something that an artist could really work well with. And I got really lucky to find, I'm sure we'll go more into this, but I found a really great, artist in Matt Schultz, and it kind of worked out. But, I love comics. One of the coolest things since I moved to LA has been, growing up on the East Coast in a small town, especially during that time, I feel like, 90s era, I felt very kind of isolated in my love of comics, right? And I didn't know a lot of other people that were into it, and I almost kind of read comics in secret in a way. But when I moved to LA, I started going to San Diego Comic-Con every year, other conventions that were around here like WonderCon and Anaheim. And I really found, all these other comic fans that it was like overwhelming at first when I first went to, San Diego Comic-Con and stuff like that. And so I think being in LA has almost like refueled even more than ever my passion for comics, because I felt like I was really in the middle of it all and a part of it. And that can be frustrating too, because it's like when you're right there, it's similar with screenwriting, you're right there. I literally live like down the street from Warner Brothers Studios and down the street from DC Comics and all these things. And, you're sort of right there, but you're trying to figure out like, how do I take that just one more step to get into it? So it can be hard and it's a long slog, but I really feel like there's been some good momentum lately. And now with this republishing of Halloween Team, through Comiker Press. They're kind of a new, relatively new, like smaller indie publisher, but they've been just fantastic in terms of shepherding the book and getting it out there again. Originally, we self-published it, but Comiker has been really great too in terms of connecting me with all these other writers and artists. And I definitely feel more now like, oh, I'm kind of part of this community that I've never really been part of before. So that has been one of the best parts of this whole experience of linking up with Comiker.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that? That is really interesting, I think, for any indie comic creator. A lot of people think, they got to go it alone. And I do think a lot of times, at least in the beginning, self-publishing makes a lot of sense. But if you could dig a little deeper into what that experience has been like, and maybe how it came about in the first place, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, so eventually, I found this artist, Matt Schultz, and he was really working hard. He did everything on this book, by the way. Pencils, inks, colors, even letters. And we had this, what I thought was a really great book, but we submitted it to every publisher you could think of, big and small. And it's just, not really many takers. And I'm sure other people experience that, especially now. It just feels like even the publishers like an IDW or, some of these others that at one point were doing a lot of original stuff, it's now just all contracted in the last couple of years. And the market for like original IP is not huge for these established publishers. So we tried everything we could, but eventually I was like, you know what? I just want to get this out there. I think we were in a point of the year where it was like, all right, if we want to do this for Halloween, which we really did, the book is called Halloween Team. So it's like, let's just self-publish it and see what happens. And, especially when you're talking about digitally, it's pretty easy to self-publish from the standpoint of you can go to Amazon or Global Comics or some of these other storefronts, and you can self-publish your comic digitally without too much issue. So we did that, and we got some pretty good traction. And, I really tried to do sort of a grassroots campaign to get coverage from like, all these different websites, podcasts. We made a good run. Like I felt like very proud of ourselves for the amount of buzz we were able to get for the book. But at some point, it's like, all right, what next, right? Because we've kind of done everything we can. And my goal as a writer, and I think Matt Schultz had a similar goal as an artist, is like, how do we do more of this, right? We don't want this to be one and done. So at some point, I was like, one thing I was doing was just submitting to a lot of anthologies that are out there. And, I had been told like, oh, that's a good way to get your work out there. And I submitted to this one horror anthology and was like, hey, I'm a writer. I'm looking for an artist to partner with. And this was literally just on Facebook, and an artist named Laurie Jameson, super talented, he responded and was like, yeah, I'd love to partner with you. So we just connected over Facebook, and it turned out to be a really great sort of working relationship. And Laurie was telling me, hey, I'm working with this new publisher, Comiker. They might be interested in your stuff. So I reached out, and they read the stuff. They liked it. And it just was all through these crazy connections that it worked out. So a lot of it was luck, but I think a lot of it is just you got to keep at it,
You make your own luck.
Yeah, exactly.
And on that note, I really do think you're talking about how you really made such an effort to get that exposure. And when I was doing research for the episode, I mean, you got some pretty big, you got some great exposure. That's one thing that I know is really difficult for most creators. Could you tell us, how did you, is that just like a secret talent you have?
I just sent a lot of cold emails and like DMs and stuff like that. And, I tried to just use every connection I could, whereas, I think this just is a good advice in general, it applies for like screenwriting, comic book writing. I just kind of have my mental Rolodex of like, oh, this person I know this other person that knows this person that knows them. And so in my email, I'll mention, like, I remember hearing about you from this person that we both know, or whatever it is, and just try and have that, like, personal touch to it. Or even like, hey, I read a bunch of your reviews that you wrote, or I read a bunch of your articles and they were really great. And if you could do something similar for Halloween team, that would be amazing. And so I must have sent, hundreds of emails. And it's hard because you obviously want to stick to a little bit of a form letter, so to speak, but you want to also personalize it. So it's hard to figure out the right balance, but I think people can tell once they have an email or two exchange with you, like, are you genuine? Are you like a real person? Are you just spamming them? Whatever. So I think the secret sauce is, like, once you actually talk to someone and exchange an email. I mean, even like you and I, you probably get some weirdos on Reddit. You put out a call on Reddit like, hey, anyone want to be on my podcast? And I'm sure you get some, like, kind of spammy stuff, and I tried to just be like, yeah, hey, I've got a comic, it's out there, here's the link. Just act very professional, very personable, and see what happens.
And that is one of the nice things about self-publishing is
Yeah.
you have something to show them. It's not like just hey, I'm just looking to get some random exposure. You've done something. It's something that they can look at and can tell, because of course there's a lot of indie created comics are not just automatically good. So
there's some good stuff out there. Nowadays I feel like you see AI stuff out there that's sort of shady, and you got to weed through. Like, I'm sure I don't envy these like sort of writers for these different websites, or people like yourself who you got to weed through a lot of stuff to get to, like, the more legitimate stuff. But there is really, really great stuff out there if you get to it.
I think a lot of the writers for the websites, unfortunately, are using AI too.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll read some stuff some places, and I'm not sure, so I don't want to call anybody out particular, but I'll read some of these pretty big websites, and it's just very, very suspicious.
Yeah. Well,
and the stuff will be wrong, and it's really bad.
Well, to that point, I mean, one thing I did that was helpful was I sort of wrote my own article. When I was first going out there, I, like, wrote up an article that I would write if I was, like, a comic book site writer. And I would send that to these writers and be like, hey, here's sort of a press release that I wrote, feel free to use it however much you want. And so I'm saving them time by, like, giving them all the information they would need, basically writing for them the article if they want it, and
read that into ChatGPT, got their own little.
Yeah, I mean, I would never do that as a writer, but maybe people did that.
That you send them the press release.
Yeah,
and I'm so sure that's got to be the move now.
Yeah,
and look, as long as people are fact checking it, not like coming back and being like, yeah, it's Easter team, it's
right.
A bunch of kids.
Yeah, and that helped too. That, like, we released around Halloween, and so people were looking for, like, Halloween spooky content, and so I think my marketing brain was definitely thinking about these things as I sent it out there of, like, oh, it's Halloween, do you need, like, a good spooky comic to feature? Here we go. So that was definitely part of it too.
Well, let me ask you this to get a little more into the story.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of things, or at least it seems that you do, to kind of keep people interested. There just seems to be every so often something is happening that is intriguing, makes you some other mystery that comes up. Could you tell us about your approach to that, if it's something that you really think about, how to keep people engaged as readers?
Yeah, I mean, look, some of my favorite writers ever are people like, Robert Kirkman, Jeff Johns, Brian K. Vaughan, who are just absolute masters of the cliffhanger. And I love that as a reader. I think back of reading through Walking Dead as that was coming out, where every issue just had an ending that hooked you so much. Where I remember reading that in trade paperbacks where I could not wait to get to the next one. And I really love that about sort of serialized storytelling. And even when I feel like even when I'm doing a more self-contained thing, I like having that more kind of chapter format, because within the story, I really love having those kind of cliffhanger moments that leave you hanging. And so I definitely think very self-consciously about that. And I think some of that comes from my TV and movie background too, of if you read a lot of the best scripts that have been done for like TV, where they're dividing the episode into acts, a lot of my favorite TV writers also have that ability where they end the act on a really great cliffhanger. And that's something that goes back, decades and decades. Now you kind of actually see less of that, because in a streaming world, for a while, they were writing without commercials. In the world of Netflix and whatnot, in the last couple of years, several years, a lot of shows were being written without act breaks. Now it's kind of coming full circle, because all those services are putting ads back in. And so now people are going back and like rediscovering the lost art of the act break when it comes to TV writing. But I never really stopped doing that in any of my writing, because I love those act breaks. Like, again, thinking about TV shows I grew up with, like the X-Files, when they would cut to commercial, they would leave you on that moment where you're like, I cannot wait for this to come back from commercial. So I've always tried to do that in my writing, and hopefully succeeded to some extent with Halloween Team.
I wish I could get the old school commercials to go along with the old school break.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing the new commercials for whatever crazy.
I think there's some YouTube videos that maybe do that, where they put in like the old commercials. But yeah, it's funny if you ever find like an old VHS or something that you maybe recorded, from TV, and just it's such a trip to see those old commercials, from that era.
I actually I do some music and make
Nice.
videos for it, and I found some old Sunny D ads, which I'm going to be using, but just watching that kid and how those kids wanted that. They didn't want that purple stuff. Although Patrick Chappelle did a good bit about that. He said he did. So what else? So when you talk about these act breaks, you talk about keeping people interested. Do you have a framework for that, or is it just something that you are able to kind of feel that out just because you've been writing for a while?
Yeah, I definitely, this is always a hot topic, I feel, among like writers, of like how much do you outline versus not outline. And a lot of people are, swear by writing an extremely detailed outline. I kind of fall in the middle, where I like to do a more broad outline, where I've got sort of the big beats mapped out, but I like to fill in a lot as I write, because for me, I like having kind of a general roadmap, but then there's something that, to me, when I'm actually sitting down writing, in that process, my brain starts like thinking about, I could do this, I could do this, I could go in this direction, that I just can't channel when I'm sitting down writing an outline. So I have those like big moments in mind, but I keep it very fluid, where I can sort of veer into different directions as I write. But I definitely write consciously towards those cliffhanger moments. So I try to outline them initially, but it could definitely change as I go. And again, like everyone has, this is such a hot topic that if I were to write right now on like Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever, hey, what do you think about outlining a script? It will become a very hot debate within an hour, because very strong opinions about this. Yeah.
Well, so tell us a little bit more about the story
Mhm.
itself, because it's I can definitely tell that you had some influences that you pulled in, but at the
Yes.
same time, it's still very unique. It's kind of you combine some great things that people love, but you make this whole new thing for them to love. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear more about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely some influences I think it kind of wears on its sleeve. I always, say this, the biggest influence of the whole thing was actually a show I loved as a kid, a TV show called Are You Afraid of the Dark? That aired on Nickelodeon, where kind of the genesis of the idea for Halloween Team, I love the whole concept on Are You Afraid of the Dark? It was
Do
basically
you
like
remember
a
the theme
spooky.
song? I wish I had a little soundboard
Oh,
for it.
yeah.
Ooh.
Was it? It was just an instrumental theme song, right?
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
little creepy little
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
Um, but some of the episodes of that show stuck with me all these years, and I love the whole like midnight society. It's this group of kids, right, that would gather, around a campfire and tell scary stories. And of course, I always thought it's sort of like fantasy fulfillment. I think for most of us, because I definitely didn't grow up with like a group of 15 friends that all loved my same interests, So like I was saying, I grew up in like a small town. I was the only one I knew who was even into comics or anything.
I didn't
So I
have
always
parents who
thought
let
it,
me go out into the middle of the woods in
yeah,
the middle of
I
the
always
night
thought
telling
it,
stories.
yeah, like the idea of having this group of all these friends that just meet every week and like tell scary stories. I mean, how cool is that? And so I was thinking of that sort of like fantasy fulfillment aspect of it. And, then my mind kind of wanders to like, well, what if they weren't just telling stories, but actually like, fighting monsters and demons and all that kind of thing in their small town. And, I remember joking at different times with like friends or maybe my brother about, man, like, if you were in the Midnight Society when you were a kid, how could anything ever compare to that? You would probably, as an adult, be working in an office and being like, hey, when I was like 13, I was in the Midnight Society. And so that sort of joke kind of became actually a plot point here and I'm always fascinated by those stories about like kids who did really interesting or significant things who are now adults. And what is that like? Because we all go through that time in our 30s or whatever where you're working in an office and you're not doing all the things that you want to be doing, and that alone is kind of like frustrating and challenging to deal with as a person. But then add on to that, like, oh, but when I was 13, I like was running around fighting monsters and demons. That must even more add to that sort of quarter life crisis or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So I sort of was thinking more and more about that. And in this story, you have the Halloween team that as kids, when they were 12, 13, they were running around solving mysteries, fighting monsters, all that. But the bulk of the story is 20 years later. They're in their 30s. They're doing all different things, but sort of the entry point character here, Tommy, he's the guy who kind of stayed around in his town, never moved away. He works in an office. He's always just like doodling pictures of monsters and demons and all that at his desk. His boss is always on his case about not focusing enough on his work. And his dream is basically, man, what if the Halloween team could reunite and come back together? And through a series of circumstances, that's what the story is about, of sort of that, again, wish fulfillment of the team coming back together after all these years. But of course, without spoiling anything, there is a little bit of a darker side to that. Why are they coming together? What are the circumstances? What does that sort of show them about their past when they start to go back into those old memories? And so there's a lot to unpack with that, and a lot of kind of layers of it's a story about nostalgia for childhood. It's a story about, being in your 30s and trying to figure out where you stand in life compared to your friends and peers. And, it's that sort of can you go home again type of thing of like, what if you could reunite with all the people from earlier in your life? What would happen? Would it be good? Would it be, would there be tension? So that's a lot of where the story came from.
Have you ever read, or not read, have you ever seen Todd and the Book of Pure Evil?
No, I've not.
It is a great show, and
Uh-huh.
I get vibes
I've heard of
about.
it.
So you should check it out
Yeah.
because I think it was Canadian. I'm actually not even sure I ended up seeing it. Maybe it was on Netflix or something a long time ago.
Mm.
But it's like a cult classic, and
Oh,
you'll
nice.
probably like it just
Yeah.
based on the vibe from this story and how I think it compares
Yeah.
favorably.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I mean, obviously, like, I grew up a huge fan of X-Files, so that was certainly an influence. It, of course, I think is a little bit of an influence there in terms of the story of them as kids, story of them as adults. Stephen King in general, huge influence on me. So he gets some shout outs in the book. Tommy, one of the characters, as a kid would always wear a, Stephen King rules t-shirt, which is also a shout out to the Monster Squad, which also a little bit of an influence on this too.
It's a really very I don't know. It really feels a lot like you took all those influences, kind of like different different colors of paint, and
Yeah.
really painted a very original picture with them, but still captured the things that make all those things so great. And
Yeah.
yeah, that just the it vibes, everybody coming back to the town, but really for me, I like it, but at the same time, it
Yeah.
has a little bit more not fun in the same way.
Right.
In my
That's a much
opinion,
darker story overall.
yeah,
Um,
this one is a lot more. I feel like um, more people. I think if you like it, you would like this. I think if you
yeah.
don't like it, you might still like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think tonally, I was definitely thinking about stuff like Buffy, Stranger Things. Um, I think, like, I really like to write a lot of, stuff that blends genres. So I have a background in comedy. I've done a lot of, like, sketch comedy, stuff like that. So even when I'm writing more sci-fi horror stuff, I like to keep it a little light, have a lot of jokes, comedy within that. There's some romance in this. There's a little bit of everything. So it's definitely a pretty genre blending type of work. And to your point, there's a lot of influences that are very, I think, apparent. But part of the fun is hopefully that it takes all of those and gives you a new direction for the story that you haven't quite seen before.
Yeah.
In terms of where it ultimately goes. So, to me, it's not that interesting to just like rewrite the stories that you love. To me, what's interesting is like having all those puzzle pieces and putting them together in a way that you haven't seen before. So that's what I tried to do here. Yeah, hopefully it works with people.
Yeah, well, so I like it a lot. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. Um, and I've appreciated you coming on the show. Can you tell us a little bit more about where we can follow you, where we can find out more about just really any and all projects that you're working on?
Yeah, definitely. You can follow me. I'm on pretty much all social media places. I'm on Blue Sky. Been using that a lot more recently. Twitter, Threads, Instagram. For the book itself, you can find it on Amazon. Their Kindle store. You can get it either digitally or in print. And that's been one of the most exciting things, actually, in terms of partnering with Comicer, is that they have enabled there to be a print edition, which, I grew up going to the comic store every Wednesday and getting my print comics, so that's super exciting. So you can get on Amazon, Global Comics, Comics.one. They've been really great in terms of being like a great partner for the book. You can get it on Comiker's website as well. And you can also get t-shirts there. They've done a good job of like, you can get t-shirts, buttons. I've got the t-shirt on now. Pretty cool logo from Matt Schultz that he designed. So yeah, it's everywhere, and check out Comiker's other books as well. They've got a lot of great stuff going on. The artist I mentioned earlier, Laurie Jameson, they've got a series of books that are also just released recently through Comiker, the Nightshade anthology. That's super fun, like horror comedy type of stuff. Highly recommend all of Laurie's stuff as well. So yeah, I'm really excited to work with Comiker, and I think the most exciting thing about the entire endeavor is that this enables me to work on Volume 2 of Halloween Team. So, Volume 1 is pretty self-contained, but it does have, a lot of cliffhangers. It ends with a lot of mysteries still out there. So it's been very exciting to go back now, and I'm currently writing Volume 2. And there's a lot of exciting stuff brewing around that, and I cannot wait to talk more about that because I think it'll be really, really fun, and I get to actually sort of give a little more closure to some of the mysteries that are there still in Volume 1.
Oh, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds great, and hopefully you can come back on and we can talk about that when it's out there.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And again, like if you're into Stranger Things, Buffy, whatever it may be, if you like spooky original stories, check out Halloween Team. I hope everyone likes it. So we're excited to be out there through Comiker.
All right. Thanks a lot, Danny.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll let you know. Actually,